Good afternoon. So, as introduced there, my name is Dylan Roberts. I'm the CIO from Leeds City Council. I'm here to introduce Richard, who is going to be doing a great majority of the session from Peterborough. But I'm also here to lay out a challenge really to the CIOs in the room, and that is around this focus of thinking about outcomes for your city or for your places, so clearly Peterborough and Leeds are cities, versus a focus solely on delivering services and making efficiencies. And I would put it to you, if you think about, you just take and consider Leeds City Council as a for instance. You know, Leeds have been hit by a 41% cut in grant in the last spending review, and fundamentally the next one you're looking at another 25 or 40%, depends on what George Osborne, I guess, wants to do as part of the spending review. Fundamentally, what that means is, I think the days of delivering services as we've done before are gone. And I'd also put it to you as IT professionals, you know, a focus just on making your processes internally and your services more efficient through the application of digital, fancy websites and so forth isn't going to cut it, to be honest. So therefore, I say that we need to take a different slant. And we need to think about how we can be involved with our places, our cities in my case, working with our partners across the city, not just the public sector partners, but the private sector as well, working with our citizens to look at enabling new solutions to city outcomes, as opposed to just focusing solely on how we can deliver more efficiencies from the services we deliver as councils. And I guess, to some degree, what I want to do now is introduce Richard, who's going to give us some examples of how that's happening in Peterborough. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Nothing like being called a headline act to make you non-nervous at all before you do it all. I am a walker though, so if I disappear down here and start walking around, then I'll get in the way of the screen and shout. I don't like standing still when I do presentations or talks. This is our lovely city that most people have probably been through on a train going to Leeds or York or somewhere else. If you ever get the chance to stop, you should do, because it is a nice place, and it is only 44 minutes from London. We've spent a lot of money refurbing it, and in refurbing it we've had to kind of take a ground-up approach as to what the future of the city is going to look like and where we want to be in not just 5 years but in 10 years. So really, to start off, we talk about smart cities a lot. The past standard for a smart city is the integration of physical, digital and human systems. This is something the council actually worked on with BSI, and it's something we try to work towards. So everything we deliver as a council fits into one of those categories. But actually where the three categories overlap, that's really where you get the smart. But really, for me on this presentation, it's about the second piece, the ISO working definition. It is actually a much bigger definition than that, but I've just taken the last line. It's in order to provide better services and quality of life to those in and involved with the city. I can't read that one, it's too small. And that's really what we're trying to do, is improve residents' lives, make them better, but also make the city better, make it a more attractive place. So, I'm going to start walking, sorry, I can't stand still. As part of what we've done then, we've really looked at the infrastructure. So this is the physical side of things. So the Connecting Cambridgeshire project that most of you will be aware of is the BT UK funded project that BT is rolling out broadband within the city, across Peterborough and Cambridgeshire to over 90% of properties. We've then introduced Keep It Clear, that's rolling out fibre broadband to the villages between Peterborough and Stamford. So those villages are all going to get a gigabit internet service. The square that I showed in the first picture is completely Wi-Fi. It's free Wi-Fi for all residents, all visitors to the city. But the big deal we've done really is the City Fibre deal. So we signed this in November 2013, and this is a 95-kilometre dark fibre network that runs across Peterborough. It connects 107 council sites, including the vast majority of schools, the City Hospital, and the new football stadium that's just been built. Stand. people keep calling it a stadium. We've built a stand, that's all we've done. I support Leicester, so I'm quite happy to be in a proper stadium. No one tweet that though. But what this gives us is a complete network across the city, not just for council services, but the reason why we signed with the City Fibre was because their ambition was then to roll this out across the entire city for businesses and residents. So they've already done a pre-demand registration piece of work. 1,250 businesses roughly signed up to take a service. That's a quarter of all businesses in the city. We currently have about 185 live business connections on top of that network. And what it has done is given a challenge to the likes of BT and Virgin to actually improve the services they offer and to offer them for less. As a council, the digital side of things, we're radically trying to transform the way we deliver services. So there's not many names on that slide you'll see that fit the traditional model of a council IT department. I don't believe that the current vendors that we use as authorities are necessarily moving in the right direction or helping us get to where we want to be as a council. I won't dwell on this slide, but I am in one of the sessions after this where we'll go into some of these things in a lot more detail. Then there's the human side. So actually how do we tap into the people of Peterborough? So DPIP is Digital People in Peterborough. That's a group of guys who work in web design, maybe freelancers, work from home, with jobs in the city, who meet up regularly, meet up once a month in a coffee shop. They have numerous talks. They talk about new ways of doing things. They talk about social media. Agile Peterborough is more your coders and your developers. That was instigated by BGL Group in the city, who most of you will know as Compare the Market. They couldn't recruit software engineers, so they went out and set this group up. They start talking to people. They're in schools, talking to some of the kids about developing, how to code. They went to competitions with some of the school kids. So we've brought them together under the banner of Open City, and we actually use them as a council. So where we haven't got the capacity or the skills within our internal IT, we push it out as a challenge to these guys to say, how can you actually help us? The last one on the screen is Fibre to the Future. That's our digital inclusion programme. We've had buses roll out across Peterborough into some of the housing associations, into old people's homes. We've shown them how to use iPads, tablets, laptops, devices like that, but we don't show them how to do council services. We show them how to do online banking or how to use comparison websites. And perhaps at the end we might say, oh, and by the way, you can pay your council tax online. But if you start with the premise of, we'll show you how to use council services, no one will turn up. So again, it's about how we're making their lives better for them. And then really, I'm going to give you kind of three examples of kind of the smarter things that we're looking at the moment. So on the left-hand side of this diagram is probably something most of you did at school, where you built yourself a weather station. You cut the top off a weather bottle, of a Coke bottle, put some markers down, measured rainfall, measured wind speed. We've now kind of brought that into the 21st century and are rolling out proper weather stations. So there's 25 of these going across the city. Don't count the red dots because there's not 25 red dots on the map, and I don't know which one's missing. So these are going into the schools primarily. So the basic premise is that we put the weather stations into the schools and we start to educate the children about the environment. And we start to show them the data and show them how some of the inner city schools compare with some of the more rural areas. Get them interested in that. Peterborough's always had this ambition of being the UK's environment capital, so it fits our agenda. But the second stage of that then is in today's world, you can obviously publish all of that information. So all of the devices that we've got are on a website. That information is all published. So all of the temperature, the pollutants that are coming out, the wind speed, anything like that, it's all measured and it's all published. You can go onto the website, you can select various schools, you can then select a range of dates and devices, and you can actually start to look at that data, see how certain things are happening across the city, see how certain areas are affected more than others. The Environment Agency are now working with us, so we have some of their approved rain gauges. What they want to understand is where in the city does it have to rain for it to affect river levels. So there's a whole piece of work just around getting the kids interested, getting them working, looking at data. But for us, really, because we can now publish it, it also means we can start to match it against other things. So these are just kind of off the top of the head ideas that we've had. There's probably hundreds more that we can start to look at. So what impact does weather have on crime? There's a whole theory that crime goes up, especially burglaries, when it's hot because people leave their windows open. What we don't know is actually, is there a peak period of temperature? Is there a time where it actually gets too hot and actually the burglaries drop off again? And therefore, do the police change the way that they rotate their shifts based on understanding what patterns of weather are coming? Hospital admissions again, A&E, when it's cold, is there a point where actually it's better for the council to fund someone's gas bill or electricity bill to keep their property warm rather than deal with the admission that would likely come after a period of cold weather? There's a few other ideas on there. We think there's going to be lots more, and actually as you bring more data sets together, it's obviously going to give you a much better picture. One of the reasons why we work with Amazon, in particular with their Amazon Web Services, isn't just that we use it to put our servers into their infrastructure. It's because of the tools that they've got available to help you do some of this work. Tools like AWS Lambda or machine learning are things that will start to help you do predictive analysis around these bits of work. So anyone who sees me talk about Amazon or anything else, I do talk about moving our server estate into Amazon, which is what we're doing currently. But for me, the bigger win is going to be the other tools that they also provide. Libraries. Always a contentious issue with councils. You've probably seen no end of consultations go out about what we do with libraries. Do we close them? What happens? There's a number of public groups that are set up to fight the cuts. We have 10 libraries in the city, fairly well spread. We were in exactly the same position about 6 to 9 months ago, looking at how we cut costs. Do we close libraries? What do we do? We implemented a system called Open Plus from a company called Biblioteca. We actually now open our libraries longer than we ever did before. We haven't shut a single one. So those of you can see at the bottom, to give you an example, Breton Library on the far side of the screen. That's open from 9 o'clock in the morning through till 1:30 with no staff in the building. It's completely open for residents to go in, swipe the card, go through the door. The computers are there, the books are there. They've got access to that. Likewise, the Central Library. If you try and book a computer in the Central Library, you'll find it's absolutely block booked. So shutting that for longer wasn't really an option. So again, the library is open 9 till 7, with a period of that time being unmanned. What it does do, as well as give your residents access to facilities for longer, it allows you to push more services online, because again you're giving residents access to PCs that some of them may not have. We're open longer. It's also a huge political score for any of you that have councillors that may want to close or want to keep things open, but actually you can't afford them. So again, what we're doing is introducing the technology, being a bit smarter about how we use it, to actually deliver the service back to the residents that they want. Finally, we've recently signed a contract with a company called Alcove. This is all around telehealthcare in a way. It's smart sensors in people's homes. So what we want to do is move away from the very traditional red cord, red button. My gran recently had a fall. At the time she was absolutely nowhere near the red cord, and she didn't have a red button anywhere near us. It's fairly lucky that she didn't pass out. She just fell, cracked her eye. She wasn't lucky that she cracked her eye. Lucky that she didn't pass out, but she was able to get to her phone and call someone. At the moment, these are the kind of systems that are being pushed and promoted across councils. For me, it's not the way we need to be going. So we're working with Alcove. It's a number of sensors that go across the home, monitoring movement. There's also door sensors. There's also key fob sensors. You've got tablets and you've got smartwatches if you need them. So this is about trigger-based working. So you can set triggers that say, if Mr. X isn't out of bed before 10 o'clock, send an alert to someone. We don't want to receive that alert as a council. We want it to go to a neighbour. we want them to be the first port of call. If it's not a neighbour, we want it to be a family member. And only once you've gone past the family member do we want that to come into the council. As I mentioned, this smartwatch base is slightly nicer than a big red button around your neck. You can set them to automatically answer phone calls. You can push prompts to people, say, have you taken the medication? You can then set that system to say, we'll send you a message asking if you've taken your medication, but then we know there's a door sensor on the medicine cabinet, so we can actually tell if you've been in the medicine cabinet as well. So it's a very, very different way of doing things. What it does do is it changes social care. So no longer do social workers come in on a Monday and say, on a Monday I know I see these 10 people. They come in on a Monday and say, the system tells me these are the 10 people I need to see. Haven't broached all of it with social care yet. There's going to be some interesting conversations. But it is something we're pushing forwards on. We're doing a 100-home demonstrator across the city, but we actually think we're going to ramp it up very, very quickly. We're also talking to the prison service about how they can use it with offenders who are released early. I know that Alco are also working with East Thames Housing around substance misuse. But the other key one for us, again, is those people who are on the edge of social care. If you can keep them comfortable in their own home for longer, keep them safer in their own home, can you actually keep them out of social care for another 2 or 3 years? And what's the value of doing that? So it all works off a phone. There's various alerts, various systems. Temperature, again, I mentioned that earlier. If we put something like Nest or Hive in as well, does it make more sense for the council to fund someone's gas or electricity bill that is dealing with flu or pneumonia or something that comes at the end of it? So again, we see Alcove as part of the story. There's going to be other sensors we put in. There will be smart meters going in. There will be water meters going in. We know, because there's a sensor on the fridge, whether people are going into the fridge. We can put sensors on the taps. We know if people are drinking. We can put sensors in the bathroom. We know if someone's visiting the bathroom 10 times a night, at which point we will automatically set them a GP appointment to make sure they haven't got a UTI, which most people know can be fairly devastating in the elderly. So it is a very, very different way of doing things that we're actually promoting. And again, looking at the costs, you can kind of see what the cost of someone being in a care home is against the cost of being someone in their own home. Huge, huge savings. Do something very, very simple. They're literally sensors that've got tape on the back that you walk in and stick up. It makes a huge difference. And again, coming back to being smart, it's about how we're making people's lives better across the city of Peterborough. So that's me, that's the 3 kind of projects I just wanted to give you a brief outline about. I think we're now doing a bit of a Q&A session. As I said, the following session after this, well, we're talking more about some of the non-standard IT that the council is using. Thank you.
Those of you who were here yesterday afternoon might recall one of our speakers saying, how on earth digital ever going to help us with care services? Well, I think probably you might have an answer there. Thank you, Richard and Dylan. So really interesting stuff there, I'm sure you'll agree. We do have time for you to put some questions to Richard and or to Dylan, so do you have any volunteers to go first? You all know from this morning how much a microphone carrier likes exercise.
Thank you. I'm Jim Wood from the Olympic Development Agency. Some really fascinating case studies. I was wondering how you engage with the citizens of Peterborough in order to develop these solutions.
It depends on the solution. So the weather station one, for example, was pushed through the groups that we work with, through the Digital Peterborough guys and the Agile Peterborough guys. Within the social care, we work very closely with our housing provider. So within Peterborough, our housing is with a company called Crosskeys. So we work very closely with them. And again, we have multi-agency teams, which I'm sure most councils do now. So we actually have prison officers and policemen and firemen actually working in council services. So again, the liaison from me is with them, and for them back out to the various areas that we need to speak to.
Do you have any more general ways of any citizen within Peterborough being able to give their view on the initiatives which you run?
Yeah, through the do some self-promotion through the Peterborough DNA website. That's our smart city piece. But coming in November will actually be the launch of Digital City Peterborough, which is our complete citywide programme that will take into account everything we're doing, not just through me, through the NHS and through others, and really pushing and promoting Peterborough, and that will have a complete feedback mechanism as well. But we do actively engage through various panels and things that happen naturally within the council anyway.
Thank you. Some more questions? Some really innovative stuff going on here in Peterborough. I'm sure you'll want to take this opportunity to pick Richard's brain. Or not, as the case may be. There we go, one down here. Thank you.
Hi Richard. What's the funding model that you've used for all this innovative technology? Is it all funded from the council, from your business cases? Have you got some investment coming in from government grants or Euro money? Where's the funding coming from?
The weather station project was funded through the Future City Demonstrator. Probably know Glasgow won 27 million a few years ago. Peterborough were lucky enough to win 3 million. So we obviously scaled down the project we put in. So the weather station piece is across that. Alcove is a pure business case. There's a saving against current spend. And what was the other one I did? Broadband, more or less. They were all broadband, and the others were business cases against current spend. Open Plus was a business case against current spend. We basically, within the council, we have a budget called Invest to Save, and it's a £100 million capital budget. So as long as you meet certain criteria on what you're doing, it's got return on investment kind of between 3 and 5 years, then we kind of have this pot of money that we can tap into. And it does make things very easy to find the funding for, as long as you've got a business case that stacks up behind it.
Yeah, I mean, just as an alternative approach as well, within Leeds, one of the approaches that we're taking is to pull together, as for instance, one of Leeds' ambitions is to be one of the best places to grow old. So what we do is we pull together, similar to what Richard's alluded to there, various community, older people basically, yeah, from their communities, together with professionals from across the system. But importantly, we bring together entrepreneurs, digital entrepreneurs, or any entrepreneurs to be honest, in the room. And we run engagement sessions based on a principle called design thinking, which is something that's been applied in places like Chicago and Amsterdam. And that's where we get to the nub of some of the problems and look at co-producing and co-designing solutions which potentially some of those private sector colleagues and companies can take on and potentially scale. And we've got quite a few successes in that regard so far. So therefore, the investment in that case is potentially about £2,000 in terms of the engagement session, putting everyone together. But ultimately the investment is from the private sector, getting a good understanding of what the problem is and potentially developing a solution which is sustainable because it's tested with, in this case, the older people, and potentially can make some money for them.
Sorry, likewise, we're doing some work around the circular economy as well. I think there's an event coming up soon in Peterborough where we're talking about that, because again, if you think about where we're funding, if we're saying the council's funding someone's school bill, for example, because it stops them going into hospital, then how does that factor back through the NHS, back through to the council? So there's lots of ways of doing it. It's not just these ones with council, there's other projects we're doing that are much varied, have a completely different approach to them. I think the way we all are with budgets and everything else is that there's a lot of kind of thinking out of the box, trying to do things differently, engaging with businessmen or local entrepreneurs, seeing what they will fund, seeing what some of the other sort of service sectors will fund as well. So for us, this is why we're taking a city approach, as opposed to this is what the council says we should do. It has to have that engagement.
One question right at the back there, on your left.
Thanks. Peter Campbell from the Business Services Association. To the extent to which you are able to answer this, I just wondered if you could possibly say how much some of the lessons that are arising from these projects are being embedded in the 38 bids that are coming forward, given that a lot of this is about working between different service providers, different agencies, and given that new structures and new commissioning structures are being established, to what extent is that being embedded in those structures from the start and in these bids from the start?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure I fully understood the question in terms of the bids. Are you referring to the IoT bids?
No, the 38 devolution bids.
Oh, the 38 devolution bids. Yeah, well, I guess there's, well, first of all, there's a lot of politics around devolution bids in terms of getting everyone on the same page with setting out some of those. But I guess, you know, from my perspective, and this is my opinion, I think that structures which, first of all, enable you from a governance point of view to take in the case of Leeds, or even wider than Leeds in terms of our devolution deal, wider than to take that place-based approach, I think is absolutely key and critical. And I'd also suggest that the involvement in a mix of the private sector is quite important as well. So it's not just the usual Chamber of Commerce big players, it also includes potentially some of the newer entrepreneurs. So I think ultimately there is a job there for councils, in my view, to seek out what talent and especially from the business sector, what the business sector is in your areas. So for instance, within Leeds, we put quite a bit of work into our economic development colleagues, put a lot of work into identifying the digital sector. I mean, there are over 1,400 digital companies in Leeds. So it's basically the second digital hub outside of London, I'd suggest. But that can only be done by, you know, trawling and getting a real view in terms of what those companies are and reaching out to those companies in terms of getting them involved in sorting some of these problems out. I don't know if that answers the question, but it's just a view in terms of what we're doing in Leeds and what I think should be done in other areas as well.